Yo, what's going on, Twim Nation, as the sisters like to say? Welcome to This Week in Mormons. I'm Jeff Openshaw, your founder, the host, your ghost host, Disney fans, and I'm very glad to be here with all of you this week. Thanks for taking the time to tune in. And if you haven't been to thisweekinmormons.com, you should do that. It'll fill your heart with joy and wonder, as will following us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and interacting there, and as will joining Patreon. And because later in the show, we're going to talk about someone who has his own Patreon page where he's charging $37 per person per month, which we never suggest. I feel bullish, so I think you should all go there and pledge at least $15 a month. That's what I'm.
Wait, you should give a better, like a punchier, non-round number, like 37. Maybe not 15. Maybe they should be pledging 1650.
It should be 37 is a prime number, right?
Oh yeah.
So
$17.
$17 a month. All right. $17 a month, everybody. That's what I'm looking for now on Patreon. Hit it. Get in there. I'm not going to lie. When I did the show with Richie a couple weeks ago, he actually gave an impassioned, thoughtful pitch for Patreon, and then some of you responded. So I guess you'll listen to Richie when he takes Patreon seriously, but not me when I joke about it. So I don't know what the balance is. But this is real. We're in your inbox. Make it happen.
They've just been waiting for you to ask for a prime number. That's
I
all.
guess that's what it was. $17 a month, everyone. Increase your pledge.
Go for 19.
I'll settle for 17. I'm okay with it. But I won't go any lower than 13. 11's also a prime number. Anyway, Jared Gilds is here, of course. That's his wonderful voice. What's up, dude?
Hey.
How you doing?
I'm okay. Are you familiar with a condition called frozen shoulder?
Frozen shoulder?
Yeah.
No, that sounds like a dance. No, I don't know what frozen shoulder is.
I wish it was a dance. That could be really cool. No, it is a condition. It is like that's like the layman's term. Like the official term is something like, what is it? My doctor wrote it down for me. It's adhesive capsulitis, which basically means the ligaments in my shoulder are like bound up and like sticking to each other. So I've got it. It hurts, man. It's a painful thing.
That's fun.
I got a cortisone shot, and I have to go to physical therapy, and I have to do these stretches at home twice a day, and it's like a little miniature self-torture session twice a day every day. I think things are getting better, but man, yeah, it's a painful. My right shoulder has very limited range of motion, and if I go past that range of motion, I have to like sit and lie down, or because it's like excruciatingly painful. It's like for something that's really not doing any damage to me, it's like just way more painful than you would think. Anyway, but things are getting a little better. My shoulder is slowly unfreezing.
Is that like curable, or is this a chronic thing you're gonna have to deal with?
No, in fact, it's interesting. It is curable. I was told by my physical therapist that I should expect 8 to 10 weeks in physical therapy, which is long for physical therapy, but it's something that you can slowly stretch out, especially with the cortisone shot. It's something that's definitely curable, but they don't know what causes it. Nobody knows. They have correlated it to people with diabetes, which I don't have, or to people with insulin resistance, which I don't think I have, but just to be sure, the orthopedist has referred me to a endocrinologist so I can get a test to see if I have insulin resistance.
That's great. And then you get to pay that specialist fee. That's so good.
Oh no, I don't have specialist fees. I've got decent insurance.
Oh, well, lucky you. Bully for you.
But yeah,
Yay, America.
So I mean, knowing if I have insulin resistance can help, because again, like I said, they don't know what causes this frozen shoulder thing, but they know it's correlated with like things like diabetes and insulin resistance. So if I'm taking a drug or changing my diet to help if I have insulin resistance, and I address it to make things work better in my body, then they say then statistically the likelihood of frozen shoulder goes down, of it coming back anyway. But yeah, it's just one of these random things where I thought I had like injured myself, but no, it's just my aging body saying, hey, here's a thing we can give you that has no known cause. But so work your way through that.
Well, I feel a little awkward about this conversation because I feel like it's just one big HIPAA violation. I am asking you things that I'm not allowed to ask you.
No, I think I violated my own HIPAA rights by bringing it up. So
you did. I don't even know why you're telling me this information.
I should probably go to prison.
Shameful.
Anyway, how are you, Jeff?
It's been a good ride. I'm hum dandy, buddy.
Is there anything I can ask about that would violate your HIPAA rights?
Plenty of things, probably.
Do you ever get like ingrown hairs in your beard?
Sometimes. You know what I've gotten weirdly in the beard? I don't know if they're ingrown hairs. I'll get these little, a little more whites. You can empathize with this. A little more white and gray are showing up, which I don't mind at all. But like every now and then I get these weird white ones that are almost like, they almost feel like the texture of like plastic. It's
Yeah,
almost like, do you understand what I'm talking
I
about?
know exactly what you're talking
I
about.
don't understand what that is. Like they don't seem like hair, and they're almost always like split a little bit. But
Hmm.
it feels like a little piece of yeah, like astroturf. It doesn't seem like hair. So at least you know what I'm talking about. This is a thing. I don't understand what this is. This must be one of just the wonders of nearing 40, I guess.
I guess. It's interesting because, yeah, I mean, you mentioned nearing 40. I know I'm just a few years older than you, but I
Yeah.
was noticing, compared to the white, this section of my beard grows back whiter every time I grow it back. And then I've got a lot of salt pepper going on in my hair, and your hairs in your beard are still pretty dark. I'm pretty
Yeah,
impressed.
the chinny chin chin is starting to get a little bit wider. I got some salt going on the sides. I mean,
Hmm.
as long as I've known you, you've always had some salt in your hair,
I
like
found my first gray
a long
hair
time.
on my
Yeah.
mission. I remember it was my like around my 20th birthday, and I was like, "What? There's some gray hair." And I taped it to a little black piece of construction paper and mailed it home. It's probably in a box somewhere.
Gotta find that, dude. I had a mission buddy of mine who started balding more on his mission, and so he had this series of photos, and we didn't have digital cameras even. So he'd like tilt his head down and pull his hair up to try to see how much recession he had going on
Hmm.
along his crown. So he had like a series of photos like every month for his entire mission of that angle of like the top of his head as he was tracking his baldness because he was absolutely obsessed with his receding hairline.
It's kind
That
of
was
funny.
yeah.
Someday that photo series will be in his family search profile, and his ancestor or his descendants will be able to track his baldness on his mission.
Yeah, maybe something like that. I can out that. That was actually former guest of the show, Alan Mount, who does Marriage on a Tightrope. Everybody, if
Oh,
you've
funny.
heard. Yeah, but Alan's a good guy. So otherwise, we're good. It's my wife's birthday tomorrow, and I have not figured out what to do on that front. I'm bad husband right now.
It's difficult sometimes, especially since
So
my wife is like the best at birthdays.
yeah,
She knows how to find good surprises and plan awesome outings and whatever else. And then I'm just like everyone. Then when her birthday rolls around, I do my best, and she always says she's happy. But I always feel like, no, I've let you down because your birthday was nowhere near as awesome as my birthday. It's tough.
that is the boat I am in. Yes,
Yeah.
same thing. I don't know what to do about that. We'll see. So if any of you listen to this prior to tomorrow, the first day download people, by all means, sound off with your ideas. Not knowing my wife at all, I would love for you to chime in about what she's been on. I mean, she has guest hosted the show in the past, but we haven't heard from her in a while. So that's life here. DC is DC. It's very humid right now, and
Idaho is Idaho, and it's very dry. So actually, we've had some rain lately. So
look at this. What a wonderful time. What a
yeah.
wonderful experience for everybody.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything else crazy cooled out, but it's nice to be back with all of you. We had the sisters last week doing their thing, and thanks to everyone who hung out for our crazy crossover episode with the Cultural Hall. Something we never thought we would ever do,
Yeah.
ever in the history of this program.
You sold out, Jeff.
But Richie and I bonded. It was very nice.
You mended fences between you.
I suppose so. Yeah, sure. We've mended fence. It's just it's at very least it's to taunt, right? That's what we can go for. Whether we get to a smart treaty, we'll find out. We're just talking about
glasnost.
We're just using nuclear disarmament metaphors on a show about Latter-day Saints, everybody. So, but viva la Reagan and viva la Gorbachev. Interesting bit of news. I don't know that there's no like mega news this week. There are some interesting stories and some things that are worth discussing, but no single one is like, "Hoo boy, here's what went down." So I'll lead off with a little bit of Administrivia that's a tad old, but I don't believe the sisters covered it last week. So that's why I don't mind bringing it up. What are you doing, Trello? Opening a new tab. Come on. So Area 70s, one of I'd say the more misunderstood callings and quorum organizations in the church, have been released prior to General Conference. So you might not think much of this, and just in case you're unaware of the structure, we're talking about quorums of the 70, right? The first and second quorums of the 70, which I believe still technically exist, even though now they always refer to those members as general authority 70s, and they don't really delineate which quorum they are a member of. But I imagine they are technically part of either the first or the second quorum. I'd say traditionally the first quorum has been more of the ones who hang out for more than 5 years for whatever reason. And second quorum, for the most part, was ones who would get 5-year callings and get released.
Yeah, and I think the first quorum, it wasn't just that it was longer than 5 years. I think the official, at least until
Until
I
you're
don't know if they've
70.
changed it, but yeah, they would get released when they were 70,
Yeah.
which is kind of funny. But
So that was pretty much the
yeah,
norm. And then back in, it wasn't until the 90s, I think, under President Hinckley, when we got rid of regional authorities and reorganized this and put in this area 70 structure and organized additional quorums of the 70. But none of these quorums are general authorities. These are not general authorities and
they're
officers of the
area
church.
authority
They're
70s.
area authority 70s, which means it's a calling like any other local calling, as in these people still have day jobs. And they're
Right.
being a 70 is part of their gig. And this is not, of course, to confuse them with 70, which was also a different form of calling that some people had even up until like the 60s and 70s. Like you can meet people who are ordained 70s in your, I did on my mission, and I was very confused about this. This guy's like, I was a 70. I was like, you're not a general authority. He's like, no, I'm an ordained like 70. This was a thing back when.
Yeah, like the office of high priest, it was an office that was bestowed by the stake. It was underneath the administration of the presiding high
Yeah.
priest of your stake, which is the stake president. My dad was a 70, but then when he got ordained high priest, it canceled that out. So but yeah, that's
Well, so is
that was a
70
thing.
lower than high priest in that? Not to be higher, rank them, but
Yeah, yeah. High
organizationally.
priest
Yeah.
was like I guess far. I mean, you're right. It's not ranked, but it is kind of ranked. Kind of like how when you get ordained a teacher, you're still ordained a deacon technically, but you're hold the office of teacher.
Yeah.
And similarly, it went. I'm pretty sure it went in the Melchizedek priesthood. It went elder 70, high priest. So when my dad got ordained a high priest, he was no longer considered a 70. That is the way I understand it. If we are wrong, feel free to correct us, Twim Nation.
Yes. So today we have our area 70s, and there are many other quorums of the 70, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and even 10th, 11th, 12th quorums of the 70, folks. How that gels with what the scriptures mandate, I'm not exactly sure, but whatever.
I remember that this was addressed back when President Hinckley organized it, because back then I think they went up to 5 quorums of the 70
Uh-huh.
when he first started this area authority thing, and he said that the scriptures say up to 7 quorums of
Right.
70, and he said, that's basically. I remember him explaining this isn't an actual limit. We can administratively organize as many as we need. Kind of like how when Jesus told Peter to forgive until 70 times 7. Like he didn't actually mean stop forgiving people after 490 forgivenesses. So anyway.
I wish. Um, so one thing I forgot about this in April conference, they called 77 new area 70s, but they were sustained in the leadership meetings rather than in the general session of general conference. So, when they read the callings and releases, and if you followed this in conference, my memories are always of it being President Uchtdorf, because for some reason he was always the one sent into battle to do this. And poor President Uchtdorf, with his German accent, would be stuck reading a lot of diverse, wonderful names, but the area 70s are when things get much more diverse, I'd say, in the ranks of leadership. That slowly is filtering up into the 70 and eventually the 12 and what have you. But this is where you have people who are where they are and live where they live, and that is their culture. So whether it is a lot of interesting names that derive from parts of Africa, or whether it's East Asian names, or whether it is Spanish and Portuguese names, a lot of things like that. And we've always heard them kind of struggle through those. But they did this in the leadership meetings instead prior to conference, instead of spending that time reading up all the sustainings. And likewise, now they are releasing a bunch of them prior to conference altogether. So it was effective August 1st. So they've already been released for about a week. We're not going to read the list of all of them unless you really want to have that, that general conference vibe where we butcher through their names like everyone else. But it's a lengthy list. You're talking a whole number of them, a whole bunch. So it's the first time they've ever done this stuff. That's the big deal. They've never released them outside of conference since the
Yeah, I will say
advent.
that, as as sort of a shout out or whatever to President Uchtdorf or former President Uchtdorf or whoever now does those things, you can tell. I mean, I always thought, man, these guys really made an effort. Like it seemed like, with certain names, they would try to like have the correct accent, like an accent instead of sound, saying it like
Yeah.
just like a gringo, or like I guess that's what I associate, because I was Spanish speaking on my mission, and sometimes I had to say things like a gringo. But like, often I was just like, I don't know if he said that right, but you could tell he sure was making an effort. So, but you're
Yeah.
right. I mean, and there's a part of me that wonders if this is one of the reasons why they're making this switch, because that way they kind of take the burden off whoever's conducting that business to not have to struggle through all these names. And also, I mean, as you mentioned, it's a long list. And
Yeah.
so it takes up some time. And we go to General Conference in part to take care of administrative things. Like, it's a conference of the church. And so we sustain and talk about, new temples and, other sorts of church business. But also we're there to be edified and be taught. And so maybe they kind of thought, at the point now where we're like reading 50 names at a time for releases, and then another 50 for some callings, like maybe they're figuring this is business we can take care of outside of the actual general session of conference and spend more time on having people speak to us and testify of
Yeah.
Christ,
Yeah.
which makes sense to me. That's my
There's there's
speculation anyway.
there's an interesting name on the list, which I don't know if people were aware of. The very last one on the list is one Kevin J. Worthen,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
who is the president of BYU. Now, what's interesting is some previous presidents of BYU, like Cecil, were general authority 70s at the same time. But so Kevin Worthen, on top of his day job, has had a calling as an Area 70 in the Utah area. Something interesting you also might not know is his middle name is literally just J.
Oh, really?
So this only jumped out at me when I looked at this beforehand. You'll notice everyone's got the classic church names, some of them using, C. Dale Willis. If you look at Kevin J. Worthen, there's no dot next to the J, so you
Mm-hmm.
might think it's a typo because everyone else got them. If you look him up on Wikipedia, there is also no dot. The letter J is his middle name. That's it.
My father's middle name was W, but it did have a period after it. Yeah.
What's behind that?
Okay, so the story goes, so he's got
And
family names that were being debated. So on like his mother's side, I want to say, oh no, okay, so the father's side, my grandfather wanted his middle name to be William, because I think either his father or grandfather was named William. And then on my grandmother's side, she wanted his middle name to be Wilbert, not Wilbur, Wilbert. And
that's
again, that's either
unfortunate.
like it was like her father or grandfather whose name was Wilbert, and they couldn't agree, and so they said, "Well, we'll put W for now." And they on the birth certificate it's W period, and they said, "We'll figure it out later," and they never did, and so it just remained Stephen W. Gillens for the rest
Well,
of
you
his
don't want to
life.
go back in and pay those administrative costs just to change
No,
somebody's name later on. That's
no. And
can't
my
do it.
father-in-law has a similar story. His middle name is just an initial, but his, I believe, does not have a period. And I don't know. I was like, why? And I don't think he fully knows why. So both my father and my father-in-law have had initial middle names.
That's interesting.
What's most interesting is then when I have had to do security clearance paperwork and filling out, my father's name. My mom doesn't have a middle name. My father's middle name was an initial. And so when I'm filling out these forms, I would always get them sent back to me and saying, you need to include the full middle name for both your mother and your father. And I would have to send back and saying, my mom doesn't have one, and this is my father's full middle name. And there was always this back and forth
Yeah,
because
I
they
believe it.
assumed I didn't understand even after I explained it. They're like, no, 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 really, you need the full one. And I'm like, I'm telling you, my father's middle name is W. Anyway, yeah,
Oh, funny.
fun stuff.
Okay. It's your turn. I'm done with that story. Good
Okay,
job, Tony.
this is just since we're in the little light warm up stories. Another interesting thing that came up. This is from the Church News website. They just very recently posted a fun little infographic chart and a couple paragraphs. And the title of this is "What are the countries with the most Latter-day Saints?" And we've debated whether or not that should be which are the countries with the most Latter-day Saints, or maybe change it even just to say which countries contain the most Latter-day Saints. Maybe that would be, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
both editors at heart. But it's a really interesting map and chart, and it's not surprising that the single country. I mean, we've talked about many times before that there are more members outside of the United States than there are inside,
Sure.
but still, the single country with the most, I guess, the plurality of Latter-day Saints inside of its borders is the United States of America. And also, unsurprisingly, number 2 is Mexico, and number 3 is Brazil, and number 4 is the Philippines. So yeah, I mean, the top, I would say 10 aren't really all that shocking at all. I thought it was interesting as you get farther down the list, which ones show up. Japan made the top 30, which I thought was cool. Uh, it's higher than Ghana, which I thought was interesting. I would have guessed that Ghana, because missionary work has been exploding there for the last decade or so, and I would have
Yeah.
thought that Ghana would have surpassed Japan, but not so. Anyway, it's just like we're not going to go through every single one here, but it's interesting to look at and kind of say, oh, why is this country so high? Also, when you think about it, so like I said, Brazil is number 3. And so then you think, and we've got a Brazilian apostle in the Quorum of the 12.
Hmm.
So I was like, that kind of makes sense. And then you look, I was looking for Germany on the list because we have a German apostle. It's not there,
Doesn't cut
which
it,
is
man.
again not surprising. I didn't necessarily expect to see any European country, well, except for United Kingdom is number 14, which again we have a whole history there.
Yeah.
But I was like not necessarily expecting to find Germany, but I was like, it's so interesting. I mean, I know that the Lord calls whom the Lord calls, and he's not going to necessarily go with the most statistically likely person, although we have a bunch of Americans, so I guess they are the most statistically likely people to populate the Quorum of the
Yeah,
12.
quit whining about representation, people. It's clearly being represented.
But I was like, yeah, Germany
We have
didn't
no.
even make the list. So yeah, Elder Uchtdorf, I
No.
guess he's just a chosen fellow. Anyway, I don't know if I have anything else to say about this other than that it's really interesting, and I'm sure people who are demographic nerds will love to take a look. Do you have
And I
anything
think
to add about this?
I think we'll see a lot of the African nations are probably going to rise up even more as growth is going on. I mean, let's see, Nigeria is number 13. I mean, it's right behind Canada. That'll change. They're only 7,000 members shy of Canada. I think Nigeria is going to be a top tenner in no time at all.
Honestly, I actually kind of thought Canada would have more. I wasn't necessarily surprised to see where they are on the list as far as order, but I was kind of
Yeah.
surprised to see that they're just shy of 200,000 because they're. I know a lot of Canadian LDS people, and
Yeah.
and then when you take into consideration places like Cardston, where there are entire communities that are like very LDS heavy. I just thought there'd be more than 200,000 members
Yeah.
of Canada,
But
but
like nobody lives in Cardston. I mean,
well, nobody lives in Canada, so
that's
I
the
mean,
other issue.
it's
And
a huge landmass that has very few people for how big it is.
that speaks to the what I would love to see. This is just an outright ranking of the number of members. I might actually do it. I want to run these numbers against total population to find out really how many members per capita.
The population
Because
density of
yes,
LDS.
seeing I want to see how densely LDS a country is because that totally.
That would,
I
I'm
think
sure, change the order of the list.
I
And
think then
again,
Tonga becomes number one after
oh, I'm
if I'm not
sure.
mistaken. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also, like I said, I was surprised to see Ghana below Japan. I'm sure that would flip them in the list. Like Ghana would certainly shoot up way above where Japan is as far as
Probably
population
so.
density.
And then you could look at it the other way too, because it's one thing that's total membership on the rolls, which isn't necessarily an indicator of active members versus population. And probably the best way to presume active members would be running the total number of members against like the number of temples in a country. Perhaps that's the best I can give you.
Yeah,
But if you divided that around, then you get another interesting statistic because that's when you look at something like the U.S. is one thing, but I don't know. I mean, Brazil's got 11 temples coming its way, which is uh, awesome, and Chile and the Philippines are really close together at this point, and Peru, but Philippines still has a lot more temples than the other ones. So that would be some fun data to crunch too, and really see if there's anything else there. What I don't expect to find out is that Turkmenistan actually jumps high on the list. I don't think that's going to happen.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, I don't think so.
poor Europe. I know we've got the UK, but as a Europhile,
Yeah,
breaks my
it's
little
funny. The
heart.
countries that don't make the list are just kind of like a grayish color on the map. And there's this giant gray swath across all of Europe and, Russia.
Yeah, and
So like, oh, not surprising, but a little
it's
sad.
basically the countries with no members. It's basically like all of mainland Asia, and then North Africa, and then like all of Europe. It's just this giant. Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's
Oh,
this
that's true. It's not
gigantic.
all, yeah. So there's the gray for Europe and then the yellow for mainland Asia and in the Middle East.
Yeah,
So
Middle East, and then of course but like China and Southeast Asian countries are not going to be high on the list. But Korea makes the cut though.
yeah,
South Korea.
yeah, and then I guess so. I guess it's not. I guess they kind of color coded it more by region. I'm reading the map a little better, so it's not like they colored it gray because it's not. But it's
No,
funny
they
because they
weren't
didn't even
coloring it
bother.
graded.
They
Yeah,
didn't bother putting in some. Oh no, no, there are faint border lines. It's just hard to see. Anyway, But yeah, if
There's
you're
a lot
one,
they should have done better. They should listen to us. Less faint borderlines. Instead of doing it by region, they should have colored the countries in based
exactly,
on
that's what I thought. I thought it was
based
going to
on
be, yeah,
based
color
on the number.
coded.
Not quite a heat map necessarily, but something like that to show at least the higher numbers, darker, deeper red or blue, and then lighter blue.
Yep,
That's what
agreed.
they should have done. And also, which, not what. Am
Yep.
I right? Or am I right? Am I
Yep.
right? Am I
So
right?
I think we've torn this apart pretty well.
Yep.
I'm just curious. You were talking about activity rates, and I'm
Yeah,
just curious if you know, like, because you're exec sec in your ward, is that right?
I sure am.
So do you know, like, what on average kind of numbers are you seeing in sacrament meeting as far
I
as
don't know what our.
percentage
I
of?
mean, I mean, this does fall more under the domain of the ward clerk in terms of tracking attendance,
Sure.
but our numbers have dipped, and I've been thinking about this. Obviously, the pandemic is a thing. Of course, I looked at our sacrament meeting attendance pre-pandemic, and
Mm.
we were somewhere like 230 or so per sacrament meeting would be pretty normal. I want to say. I'm going to look it up right now. I'm logging into LCR right now, folks.
Mm.
You're getting a window into the classified realm of the church. We're talking about clearances.
Yeah. I
This
mean,
is
yeah, of course, I don't want to, like, nothing proprietary. I'm just curious.
I
I've
don't
been
think this is
serving
proprietary.
as the ward membership or the assistant ward clerk over membership, which is kind of a new calling for me. I've never been in a clerk position before, but I count. I actually kind of enjoy standing up at some time during the sacrament meeting and stretching my legs so I can go walk around and count people. Uh,
Yeah.
and we're pretty consistent, around 50 to 55%. And we also count, like, we are still we'll talk about this later, but we're still broadcasting sacrament meeting over YouTube,
Ah.
and I can see on the YouTube page how many people are viewing. So we have an estimate of how many people are viewing at home, and we count that in our sacrament meeting attendance numbers. So if you count the
So
people at home, we're getting between 50 to 55% every week.
and we were doing that before, but when we were hybrid like that in that sense,
Mm-hmm.
the clerk and I put a spreadsheet together so we could get the total. And I was also looking for any trends, like I was looking at key milestones we might have had that would possibly affect attendance going up or down, like when masks came off, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm looking, our average sacrament meeting attendance in 2020, at least pre-pandemic, which does not account for summertime. Summertime, I think we have dips in the DC area in particular. In summer, a lot of people
Oh
go
yeah.
elsewhere. But we were around 64 to 68% sacrament meeting attendance. In 2020, and now we do not have any Zoom or anything going on. Sacrament meeting is church, and that's it. And let's see, and that hasn't significantly changed because I think we kind of went back to that because when did church went back to being church for everyone back in June, July, but we're only at like 44%. Like we've dipped, and I'm trying to figure out what it is because I don't know if there's other people who just.
And that's accounting for vacation stuff. And
Well, it's not. I mean, that's just the straight up attendance. We're not
huh,
boosting the numbers like saying, well, so and so's on vacation. We should count them as if they were here.
right.
But so I'm wondering if there's usually a summer dip because I can't look at our spring numbers. We were still doing Zoom hybrid stuff then, so it's a bit different. So I have been thinking about this a lot. It's funny you brought it up because I'm wondering once we get back into the fall and the school year kicks in, if we will see that go to somewhere normal or if we are seeing some sort of permanent drop and who's not coming now because of it. And is it pandemic related, i.e., because they don't feel safe coming, or is it pandemic related because some people got used to not coming to church and now they just don't want to come anymore, regardless of the health and safety concerns?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry you brought that up, and I was literally looking at
No, I
it
was
like
just curious.
last night, and I was thinking about that.
My guess, and it's hard to say because I am, my wife and I are relatively new in our ward, and our ward is relatively new itself because just a few months ago they completely reorganized the ward boundaries in our stake, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's hard for me to say since I don't really know this ward well. But my guess is that we will see our attendance averages kind of go up a little bit once school starts again because I think a lot of
Yeah.
people. It seems like there's a lot of different faces from week to week and I think people are going on vacation a lot. Nobody comes to Shelley, Idaho on vacation. So, which was funny, right? Because like when we were both in Alexandria First Ward, we would see in some ways attendance go down each week because a lot of people would leave for vacation, but we'd also see a
Yeah.
lot of people come and attend our ward because we were in such close proximity to DC
We had a
that
lot of
you'd get
visitors there.
visitors
Yeah.
all the time, and
Yeah.
including, on some weeks we'd have like a busload of like BYU gymnasts or something like that just show up to our building and totally boost our numbers. And so, yeah, summer numbers were really interesting in Alexandria. But here, like I said, like a lot of people leave for vacation, but nobody's like coming to Shelley. and attending church because like even if you were going to go to Idaho, I mean, Idaho is definitely a vacation spot for a lot of reasons, especially if you love the outdoors. But we're not close to like Craters of the Moon National Park. We're not close to the West Yellowstone entrance and things like that, like other places in Idaho are. So my guess is that we're seeing a little bit of a dip, and that we should I'm guessing we'll be closer to 60 to 65% attendance, which is not bad, when you consider things. But anyway, I was just curious about that because you brought it up. Like we're seeing back on that church news article we were talking about, we're seeing sheer number of baptized and confirmed members, but that doesn't tell us how many active people are attending church and being active in their church community in those countries. So it'd be interesting to see that too, although I doubt the church would release that to us.
The church is cagier than Netflix when it comes to releasing their numbers.
Yeah.
I think it's going to happen. Yeah, I'll be watching mine. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I hope it goes back up, but if it doesn't, then that's going to be. I'm going to come to the bishopric meeting and be like, "Look, we got to talk about something serious, brethren. Okay, we're spending all our time talking about the word barbecue. Let's table that. Get real for a second. All right. Random stuff here. Former Utah governor is the Tabernacle Choir's new president. If you're a Utahn or a fan of the George W. Bush administration, this will mean significantly more to you because Michael O. Leavitt, the former governor of Utah, and was he HHS secretary under Bush? Is that what he did?
That sounds right, but I can't remember. I know he was in Bush's cabinet, and it was
he served twice in the cabinet. He was the EPA administrator, and he was also secretary of health.
That's right. I remember EPA, and I remember thinking, what qualifications?
What qualifications
to run the EPA? I mean, I guess most cabinet members really often aren't qualified for their jobs, but
it does happen. I mean, it is funny for me to get Utah, unless you're like, especially in Utah, which deals a lot with industrial pollution, and unless you're some kind of maverick in the state who's worked really hard to mollify those issues. I don't see why you'd be special for the EPA from Utah because it's just chemical love in Utah. Anyway, but regardless. There he goes. He's going to be the the Tabernacle Choir's president, the Tab Cats people. He's replacing Ron Jarrett, who's been there since August 2012. This is cool. I'm surprised I've actually seen some weird pushback on social media, alleging this just further blurs the line between the church and the Republican Party and politics. I'm like, okay, like if they called Spencer Cox and said, leave the governorship, and you need, or if it was even if it was Herbert or somebody more recent, okay, maybe, but this guy
or if they had done like a Nezra Taft Benson and said, okay, Governor Cox, while you're serving as governor, you are also going to be.
Yeah. But like he served as governor from, it was some time ago.
It was the early 2000s.
Yeah, he was governor for 11 years across the late 90s, early 2000s. And he joined the George W. Bush administration. He hasn't been in public office
for over a decade.
Well over a decade. So I think this is perfectly fine, right? It's good deal. Leavitt's a nice guy. Most everyone knows that Leavitt's a nice guy, and I would love this if I'd spent a career in politics. And who knows what he's probably been a consultant for the past handful of years, and cashing in that sense. And then you get asked to do this. That's awesome. Who wouldn't love to let the Tabernacle Choir be your gig and taking care of the choir? That would be very fulfilling. I would love that. I would relish that.
Another really, I mean, I guess not really interesting, but sort of interesting thing that the article mentioned is that they're changing the structure of it. It used to just be that there was a president and he would, administer the choir, and now they are changing it to a presidency model. So he has counselors in his presidency over the Tab Cats, which I thought was just kind of interesting little administrative change. It makes sense. Like they are an internationally renowned choir and they do international tours. They're also, the article mentioned that they're trying to increase their online presence to give better access to the choir's performances to people around the world. So if you're trying to run this choir that has international renown, that has a big job to do, why not have a presidency instead of a president? So take
note, people. If you have a president for your ward choir, you should also have a presidency.
Was take note a choir related pun?
No.
Oh,
no.
Okay. Just one quick little note of interest is, and this is probably about the most Mormon thing that I can say. Well, I don't know. I could say some pretty Mormon things, but this is a really Mormon-y thing. I actually knew Governor Leavitt's daughter. She and I worked together as EFY counselors. So the daughter of the governor of Utah and I were EFY counselors together on campus at BYU. Rick's. Well, was it Rick's or BYU? Anyway, whatever it was. Yeah, it's like a pretty Mormon-y sentence. She was super nice. We had a fun time being counselors together. I have no idea where she's at today or what she's doing, but I remember thinking, she's cool. Her dad's probably pretty cool too. That's what I got.
All right. All right. All right.
That's my
All
claim
right.
to
All right. All
fame.
right.
I know
All right. All
former
right.
Governor
All
Leavitt's
right.
daughter,
All right. All
or I
right.
knew
All right.
her. Here's another little just interesting tidbit, because again, I think that's mostly what we have this week. The Activities Committee is making a comeback, sort of.
This is not little. This is like this is
I was
landmark
going to
news
say,
for me
so,
as far as I'm
and
concerned.
it's interesting. I mean, what we've got linked here is the article that I think you wrote. Is it you? Or
Yes, that's my visage.
yeah. So, and just kind of talking about some of the recent updates to the manual that kind of got announced. You might have gotten an email blast from the church about administrative updates. And there's some interesting things in that update, and we could talk about others if we wanted to, like how it says that, it says very specifically that we shouldn't be talking about politics in church, which I would love to happen in my ward. But also, I mean, the main thing that all of us agree is the most important update is that basically there's now an option if you want to form an activities committee. And it kind of felt like it's like saying like it could be ad hoc, it could maybe not be ad hoc, but there are activities committees coming back. And I'm fine with this. I'm for it, I guess, as long as I never get called to the activities committee. I seriously spent.
But you're good at activities, man.
Well,
You've
I
got a
guess. I
you
mean,
and
that's what
you and
people.
Kelsey have a knack for that kind of stuff.
Well, I guess that's what people think about me, because
Yeah.
there seriously was about 5 to 10. No, well, let me think. It was at least 6 years of my life where I was either on or leading an activities committee of some sort. And I was tired of it. I don't want to do that anymore.
Well, that's fair. But
I
what I was
remember.
tired of? Being in a ward council and being stuck planning all the activities.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of liked the way we did it in Alexandria First Ward, where we would call and it was we kind of did call an ad hoc committee, but what we would really do is like call a couple, and sometimes it would be two couples, but
Yeah.
often I think it worked better when there was just one couple who knew that they were in charge, and say, you're in charge of the Easter activity, and we are going to provide you an ad hoc activity. Like every organization was in charge of like providing one or two people to be a part of it. And I liked that because it was better than telling the primary president or the elders quorum president, like, on top of everything that you do leading this organization, you're also going to like plan this activity. And I was like, that was I know a lot of wards did that. You yourself, I believe, got saddled with that.
Yes, Jared, let's talk about the Christmas party 2015 when I was in charge of it for the elders quorum. Let's talk about how at the time I very explicitly had invited the members of the quorum to come and help do setup, and no one showed up. And it was me and my wife and my son sitting in his stroller doing everything. And I'm sending emails, wondering where these people are, and realizing I had failed as a leader because no one would listen to me. And let's talk about that, Jared.
I'm sorry.
Where were you?
I don't know.
My own presidency wasn't even, you weren't in my presidency, but
No.
my counselors didn't even show up until I started nagging people. And I was like, what is going on here?
I might have been out of town. A lot of people
work?
would leave for Christmas stuff.
No
like
one
early
was
in
out
that
of
ward.
town. You're all just delinquent.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's, so I guess I should have said my original statement a little different. I like the way Alexander First Ward ended up doing it, because in the beginning, it used to be just like, we'll just make this organization in charge of the activity. And that didn't work. But then eventually it was like, no, we'll make a couple in charge. We'll make each organization provide help, from their organ. Anyway, the
But
point
in
is,
fairness,
activities committees are coming back, and that's probably for the best. And again, as long as I never have to serve on one, I'm just done.
and I gripe about that time when I was elders quorum president and I got saddled with it. But in fairness, I feel I see so many wards where the Relief Society is just by default in charge of the Christmas party every single year.
That's
and
sexist, man.
And I know they don't like it. So in that sense, like I was all about being equitable and being like, sure, this is I'm down. We'll do this. It'll be fine. Obviously, there were things that happened that I didn't love, but I think the party was still great. But
Yep.
I do not like that we default to the Relief Society just like being in charge of it. And I mentioned this on Sunday in Ward Council, like, hey, I don't know if you guys saw this, something to think about. Activities committees can be a thing again. And the Relief Society president immediately was like, you mean we don't have to be in charge of the Christmas party? necessarily. And I said, yeah, that's what this could mean. Her face just lit up because it's a huge undertaking and nobody wants to deal with that.
Yeah, well, and
So,
why? I mean, yeah, like I mean, I don't want to like oversell this, but that just feels really sexist to me. That it's like, oh, the women's organization will run the Christmas party, or the women's organization will run the Easter party, or whatever. It's like, how about
and
we
only
all
women
take turns?
will be our music conductors as well. That's another one I see quite a bit. Like this assumption that men shouldn't serve in ward music callings for some reason. Because
Unless you're like a pianist or an organist, like they will just take you, no matter what your sex is. You know, if you could play the piano or the organ well, it's like, okay, that's it. But you're right. It's much more rare to see a man serving as like a ward chorister or a ward music coordinator or whatever, or the choir director, which
and I was
is
spoiled.
strange.
And just very quick, but like growing up in the ward I grew up in, the guy who is the ward music chair and the chorus and the choir director has had that calling since like 1980, and they've never released him. And his wife is the organist for the ward, and for some reason, that is just like the understood way things should be because he's very good at it. He's an extremely talented musician. The ward, the Christmas and Easter programs are not just like let's get up and sing a hymn, then have a kid come up and read a scripture. It's like a thing with he brings in ringers that play other instruments. You've got oboes and harps and all kinds of nonsense, right? And so growing up,
Only instruments with a worshipful sound, though, right?
yes, of course. And he's a great trumpeter. And so he'll get up there and get his cornet and like start doing stuff.
According to the
Um,
handbook, that is a less worshipful sound.
I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. Anyway, so like growing up, like for one thing, I always saw all the time he was up there conducting the music, and he always has been. And it's like one of the most bizarrely consistent callings I've ever seen. And I'm amazed that even across different bishops, ward boundaries changing, stake boundaries changing, everyone's just been like, "No, Dave just stays there. We're never gonna call. We're never gonna feel inspired that he needs to do any other calling. That is
I'm
what he's
for
supposed
it
to do.
if it works. If
Why
it ain't
not?"
broke, right? Yeah.
All right, some quick stuff here. A missionary on TV in Kosovo for the second time in less than a month. An American missionary appeared on TV. Previously, last month, two missionaries appeared on TV in the Republic of Georgia, not wearing ties. I don't know that was one. Sometimes that's a thing. I didn't know that was a thing in the Republic of Georgia. I thought it would be a thing in like Russia, perhaps, but Georgia is free and wonderful and beautiful, and it's very high on my travel list, and I've never been. We should go to Georgia, Jared. Let's do it.
We should.
I really want to see Tbilisi and some of the other cities. I've been dying to go there. Anyway, this is pretty cool. This is just one missionary shows up on television in Kosovo. Kosovo, the country recognized by most countries in the world, but not all, least of all Serbia and Russia. But Kosovo is part of the Albania mission. Kosovoan people are northern Albanians ethnically,
Isn't
essentially.
that Kosovars, not
Kosovo.
Kosovoan?
See, I wanted to be. If you look up Kosovar, that was a term the Yugoslavs would use to describe the Albanian language they spoke in Kosovo.
Oh,
It's a bit goofy, but either way, whatever we want
I
to
should
call
have known
them.
better to correct you on geographical terms.
No,
I'm
no, no.
sorry. I'm sorry.
I'm learning these things too, right? I'm not a Balkanophile completely, but very, very cool. This is just cool news. Just did LDS Living covered this terrific missionary Jonah Pingree, not Pingree. It's on some kind of morning, evening chat type show. Obviously, I don't speak a lick of Albanian, so I have no idea what they discuss. There's a couple of areas where I could hear some cognates that I think were, you can hear like profetia or something like that. That sounds like prophet or what have you. Either way, I love whoever's arranging this, whoever's having the foresight to do these sorts of things. Kosovo is part of the Albania Tirana mission. Good for them. There's only a couple branches in the country. Neighboring Albania has a whole stake, which is a little fun bit of trivia. Of all the places in Eastern Europe, Albania's got a stake. And it's just great. Nothing else cool about it. Just love that it showed up here and they
I think it's cool.
rocking it.
This is not unprecedented. If you're familiar with like the Osmond family, Don Osmond, who is Donnie's son, he served a mission in England, in the United Kingdom, and the Osmonds are still quite popular and well known. I guess they're known here as well. We continue to get the Osmonds on things like Dancing with the Stars and things like that. But anyway, Don served in Britain, and he, as far as I understand it, I mean, he did normal proselyting things, but he also did stuff like this because it was a good chance for the church to have a face on the television and to get for people to hear from a missionary and get to know our church a little better. And I think that's great. Like if you have an opportunity to do some cool PR stuff like this, and it seems like from this article anyway, it seems like, I mean, I know it's an LDS Living magazine, but it seems like he's well received and people like seeing this American guy speaking Albanian on their show and talking about their food and stuff like that. So I don't know, if this is a good way to get the word out that the church is in the country and that, this is who we are. And this is, look out for these young men and talk to them if you get a chance, like, why not? Right.
Yeah. A couple corrections, by the way. Apparently, there's linked to a church news article about it. They say it's the Adriatic South mission now, not just the Albanian mission. So I'm sure that covers probably Bosnia, probably other countries are in it as well.
Sure.
So I want to cover that. And the church news article actually goes a bit more in detail and talks about how he had struggled learning the language in the first place. So it's kind of a great miracle that he spoke so fluently on screen. And his companion is also an Albanian, so that's got to help. That's a great way to rock.
What language family? I mean, beyond Indo-European, what language family is Albanian in? What is it? Is it related
it's
to
kind
anything?
of on its own. I'm trying to think if it's actually what it falls. Let's see here. Early forms Proto-Albanian dialects. I'm trying to see if it technically even it is Indo-European.
Yeah.
But some languages are not.
Most of the European languages are Indo-European. Like you get
Not
some
Hungarian, Finnish, or Estonian though.
Or Basque, right?
Or Basque. Yeah, Basque is the most honked up of all of them. Basque is something else entirely. So I'm trying to see where it might fall into the. Anyways, we can spare you, everyone, a deep dive into the affinities of Albanian and where it comes from. But it's considered kind of an isolate within the Indo-European language family because it's not really linked to anything else. They think it comes from one of the Paleo-Balkan languages of antiquity.
Well, and that would make it, I think, difficult to learn because like you have very little to tie it to. Like I've been doing. I studied Spanish and learned Spanish for my mission, and then I've been doing a little bit of French just for kicks as a hobby on Duolingo, and it's easy because I can connect it to English and I can connect it to Spanish. And if you were trying to learn a language like Albanian and you couldn't connect it to anything, you're just starting from scratch. Yeah, I'm looking at this little language tree thing, and it is its own branch. It is technically, like you said, an Indo-European language, but nothing else is sharing this branch on the tree. So, anyway.
Good job, Albania. I love I don't know why I love so much that we have a stake there. I don't know if it's just because of Albania's interesting political history. It was allied with the Soviets, not the Yugoslavs. They just very much did its own. Has a whole interesting history. It was a communist country. It's democratized. Obviously, most of the time now you see it depicted as one of these places where lots of thugs are going to abduct your children, that kind of thing. But it's cool. It's just, of all the countries, and it's largely Islamic too, secular, but Islamic in history and culture. And we have a stake of Zion there. I don't even think we have a stake in Greece, and we've been having missionaries in Greece for like 100 years. So,
right? No, it's pretty cool.
Good for you, Albania.
Good for you.
And Kosovo, but good for you, Kosovo.
Separate good for you, country. Kosovo, which is yes, independent. What is it? Is it?
Wonder if Kosovo
is it considered a city-state, a principality? Like what is?
No, it's much bigger. It's much larger than that. I mean, Kosovo is almost the size of Montenegro. It's definitely not. It's not like a
Montenegro isn't that big either, Jeff.
I know, but a city-state is something like Monaco or the Vatican,
right? That yeah.
I mean, then there's the micro-states like Liechtenstein, and San Marino, which do have different cities in them, but they're still very tiny. Andorra is a little bit bigger, but also tiny and has different cities. These ones are just small, but they're not.
So Kosovo is larger than Liechtenstein.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah,
let's keep talking about missionary news. And this is interesting because this isn't necessarily new news. Like this was like definitely kind of made the rounds on social media among LDS people because it's such a novelty. But this actually happened a year ago in Idaho Falls, which is very close to where I currently live. But a man apparently had robbed two missionaries at knife point on a sidewalk in Idaho Falls because they had backpacks and he assumed that there would be drugs in their backpack.
Sure, I mean, that makes sense.
I guess this is and it clarifies later on in the story. It does talk about how this man not only had some drug issues, but likely has some mental health issues. But it's funny because when we're talking about population density of the church in Idaho Falls, it's very high. Like there's a lot of LDS people, and if you don't know a member of the church, you at least still are familiar with the church because it's everywhere here. And so the fact that a man in Idaho Falls would see two missionaries and with backpacks and think these nicely dressed young men in white shirts with conservative haircuts probably have drugs in that backpack. Like it's just an odd thing, and that's I think why this has been going around. But the reason why it's came up in the news is it's almost a year later, and the man was finally sentenced. There was a plea bargain. There is we won't go into all the details, but it looks like there were some concessions made recognizing his issue with drugs and mental health. So he's getting some treatment, but on top of that, he's also going to be sentenced to some time in prison. Anyway, it was just like a novelty because it's like just a funny story to think about when you think, yeah, why would anybody rob LDS missionaries assuming that they had drugs on them?
And they never recovered the backpack.
I know that I was going to say that was,
No.
that was like the last line. The last line of the article is the missionary's backpack was never recovered. It's like dun
Oh.
dun dun. Like
I mean,
oh no, their flip chart. I guess we don't have flip charts anymore.
I mean, unless they were keeping their phone in there and not in their pocket, you're pretty okay. I mean, you don't even have the whole like the area book. All that stuff's digital now. So
I guess. I mean, the only thing I can think of is that maybe personal scriptures were in there, which can be a loss. You know, you've got your writing in the margin, but a lot of you, even in that, like a lot of missionaries are just using tablets now. When they go out, they're not necessarily carrying around physical scriptures, so there might not have been much, like you said, much of a loss at all, unless it was a really nice backpack.
Jared, quick poll for you and for our listeners as well. I was thinking about the other day, like I haven't cracked open my old quad in a while. I largely read on my phone or online or something like that. But my quad is full of my notes and all my a lot more stuff. I do highlight things online and save them to my account. I was thinking if I should go through my quad page by page and then go on to churchofjesuschrist.org and highlight and add all the same remarks and references that I have in my quad and digitize them. Has anyone else ever done this? I'm curious about that. If anyone else has ever done this,
it might be an interesting exercise. Personally, I don't think I would do that. I think I could see going through and seeing if I felt like there was anything like noteworthy. Like, sometimes I have quotes in the margins or just like little insights and stuff. But I kind of like the idea of like, like that scripture study should always be fresh. And so it's kind of nice even to like, I know people who, will read through a copy of the scriptures once or twice or whatever, a certain amount of times, and then like shelve it or give it away and then start it fresh again because they don't want to be influenced by what they thought was important the last time they read it or the 2 times ago that they read it or whatever.
There's some of the brethren have even said they do that.
No, like Elder Eyring, President Eyring has been really specific about how he'll get like a just a paperback blue missionary type copy and like read through it looking for certain things and mark it up. But then once he's done that, like again, shelve it or give it away and then start with a fresh copy because he's looking for something else. So I don't know. I mean, like I said, I think there could be value in that because it might be nice to see things that you thought were important or things that spoke to you or notes that you jotted down in the past. But I don't know if you necessarily want to be like, and this therefore these are the important scriptures to me and these are the insights that I want to have. I don't know. Like, let's
look at the flip side of this though. When I've seen general authorities, for example, attending meetings, they are largely getting out their iPads when they're like flipping around, finding scriptures, things that come to their mind. I'm assuming they take notes in them as well. And unless they're giving them new church accounts anytime they want to do this, I would assume that there is not an effort to wipe the slate clean and start over with your annotations if you're doing it all digitally.
That's true.
I would love to, if you're a general authority and want to let us pick your brain on this, please, by all means, come on. Not if you're one of those old 70s. That's not a general authority. That doesn't work.
No, those steak 70s. We don't want to talk to you, steak 70s.
Okay. Couple quick mentions here. The Lima Temple had a cross projected upon it. What? That symbol of not Latter-day Saintdom? Yeah, so there was it's kind of cool. They did it with projection mapping. There was people gathered in July on the grounds of the Lima Peru Temple in a program called Oramos por el Peru, which means we pray for Peru. And it was a program broadcast on national television. It was a great exercise in ecumenism with different faiths talking about their love for Peru and everything that was important about Peru. But it was this major effort across faith lines, and they did all kinds of projection mapping on the temple in Peru. I mean, you see imagery here of like the front of the temple with like Machu Picchu projected upon it. It wasn't just the cross, but we played ball with everybody putting on what they wanted to put on and letting the big temple walls serve as a projection backdrop for whatever they were doing. So it's more than just the cross, but obviously it stands out when you see this image of a big illuminated cross upon one of our buildings, because that might be the first time in history of the church that we've had a cross on one of our temples, would be my guess.
I like it. I
It's
don't know.
cool.
I think it's cool. Like, it's so funny because like we get up and come up with all these reasons why we don't use crosses as symbolism, and it gets to the point where you hear some members like basically making these arguments that we are anti-cross as a symbol, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that could very easily be overstated. I don't think we're anti-cross, and I don't think there's really any particularly strong reason why we don't put crosses, other than that we see ourselves as a different type of Christian church. Like, I think there is an effort to distinguish ourselves from other Christians. And that's probably the main reason we don't put crosses up. But this whole, like, it's a symbol of his death when we want to celebrate a living Christ and things like that. It's like the cross can be a symbol of anything you want it to be, including the resurrection, including, you know what I mean? Anyway, so I
Yeah.
just
Well,
think it's funny.
there
Like,
isn't.
I just think it can be, people can get a little strong and a little out of hand. I mean, members of the church with their anti-cross sentiment. So the fact that one was projected on the side of the temple, while like you said, is maybe unprecedented, I think it's great. You know, it's a symbol of Christianity. In your article, you said something about like yay for ecumenism, or however you say that. Which again, like, we are Christians, we want to have fellowship with fellow Christians, so why not? Why not embrace some nice Christ typology, including the cross, the symbol of the
To
cross?
be clear, there is an entry on the church's website called, it just says cross. That's
Mm-hmm.
all it is. Cross, gospel topics, cross. It does say the classic line, they talk about how the cross is a symbol of the death and resurrection and a sincere expression of faith. And we also remember that. But because the Savior lives, we do not use the symbol of his death as the symbol of our faith. That's pretty much all it says. And it has a link to a talk from President Hinckley. And that's the
Which
only
is
one that
fine, but like I said,
cross
I think
references
you
it.
can take that and run with it a bit far. In fact, I think if you run with it more than two steps from that statement, it's a bit far. So, like, yeah, like, I see that, and I can understand that sentiment, but it's like, I just hate that it gets to the point where sometimes people in the church see a cross and they kind of like look down on another church for having a cross, because they're like, oh, look at them celebrating the death of the Savior when we should be recognizing the living Savior. It's like,
I
hey
know.
man,
I
it's
know.
their faith, they're expressing their faith, it's our
But
faith
their faith
too.
is wrong, Jared. It's wrong.
All right, we're moving on.
Come
um,
on.
so just really quick, I don't know if this is really, there's not much to delve into, but it's just worth mentioning the San Salvador Brazil Temple. I did that with a very Spanish accent. I'm sure there's probably a better Brazilian Portuguese accent with which to say that.
Yeah, it's
Uh, oh man, let's not
That's
get all.
that's what
You
it
see, now
is.
you're getting all snobby linguistically when before we were talking about being snobby symbolically, with our iconography. Anyway, San Salvador, Brazil. It's a Latin American country, and I did my best with a Latin American accent. They just had their groundbreaking, and it's just really cool because the article mentioned, actually up there in the headline header, this is the 11th temple for Brazil, which is great. Like, it's a big country, and we don't know, like we said from that earlier map, what the population density is, but it's a pretty dang big country, and the fact that we have now 11 temples in it, I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, good for them.
Or not, we don't have 11 temples, we're starting the 11th temple.
It's going to happen, though.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. All right, folks, it's been a while since we've bothered you with talking about pandemic things and vaccines. So it's important that we keep that going. And at this point, I'll watch in our analytics as it all shuts down. I was just warning you up front. I know we're already at time. Anyway, there was an article up by common consent. I think this is a fair thing we can all discuss, though, frankly, wherever we stand on a number of issues. But by Sam Brunson, grading the church's pandemic response. Sam has his point of view, but his point is almost 18 months into the pandemic. Just let's reflect on what the church has done and what hasn't done, perhaps, or what we've done in our local units, and kind of grade how good of a job we've done with this. I mean, his conclusions, speaking broadly, he thinks the church let out very strongly on the pandemic, because we kind of, before we were mandated to, the church just shut everything down. If you remember that, there was a swift, strange week there in mid-March of 2020 when all of a sudden these dominoes started falling. They closed the MTC, they did this, and then they're like, boom, no more church meetings in person at all. And they were pretty, I think they were pretty ahead of that. But in the time since then, as Sam argues, it's more like we've kind of just, I don't know, just kind of floated back and forth, not really picking a lane completely, like sort of saying vaccination's good and you should do it, but not not embracing all the tools we have to get that message across. I mean, Sam basically is saying like, they message on their social media posts about the brethren getting vaccinated. Sure, there are updates to handbooks. There's things that we have done that are very clear. The church has a clear pro-vaccination stance in general, but especially with regards to the pandemic. But there's also not a letter from the pulpit being read at
Yeah,
the
it's
same
a
time.
clear stance, but it's not a loud stance,
It's
right?
not a loud stance. Yeah. And I would agree with that. I mean, it concerns me at the same time because you and I are, as Sam likes to phrase it, people who are, always on, people who are online a lot. I think I'm online all the time. I'm very online. That's the expression he uses. And so we see stuff like this. I care about handbook updates. We read these sorts of things. But are lay members getting that messaging? Are we assuming all the lay members are on Facebook and Instagram and getting that messaging?
Right. And he
And if so,
points out, like there have been plenty of times in the past where the church has felt like this is an important message and they have a signed, first presidency letter that they instruct to be read from all pulpits and sacrament meeting. And so then, the question arises like, well, if this is so important and they're doing all this messaging and they're showing pictures of the first presidency getting vaccinated and they're tweeting about it, why is there not a letter? Like you said, because like people who are less online than us may not be aware of those things. This is an important issue. This is an issue that the church has a stance on. Why are we not hearing a letter from the first presidency being read out saying, hey, no, seriously, go get it? I don't know.
I don't know either. And it's so that's clear. I mean, as we're thinking about how the church is done, that's the thing for me that I would love to see more of. And it's not like we need to have our hands held and be told what to do. And I think a
Sometimes we
lot of
do,
people,
Jeff. Sometimes we do.
and maybe we do, and I think a lot of us would agree with that. Like, we talk about teaching us correct principles and the people will govern themselves and all that kind of stuff. I think what's been fascinating is we shared this jokey, just like this meme on the Facebook page last week, I think it was, maybe a week and a half ago, that it was taking the beat to follow the prophet, but basically saying like Russell was a prophet, asked us to obey, get vaccinated. It was basically saying get vaccinated, but people won't listen and do it. And now Delta is surging in Utah of all places where people won't do it, won't get vaccinated. The comments were fascinating to me because usually on our Facebook page, it's reasonably 50-50. That's fine. We have people who are not in favor of the vaccine for a number of reasons and feel that they have the agency to refuse it. And we have people who are very much in favor of it. But in this case, I don't know if we got sent somewhere else, but it was almost bombed with people very upset that this was even being shared, as if we were twisting the words of the prophet. We have not been commanded to do anything, which is true. I haven't said, "Thus saith the Lord, ye are commanded to be vaccinated."
How often does that even get said?
Very rare. And for devotees of President Benson, we should know that one of his main points of the prophet was saying just because the prophet doesn't say, "Thus saith the Lord," doesn't mean it's not a commandment from or counsel from God.
Yeah.
So the comments surprised me much. They were different from what I thought we were going to have in that sense. But it strikes me as so interesting that folks are so obsessed with the rugged individualism here. That's like, they're going out of their way. Every single statement by the church says getting vaccinated is our personal decision, which it absolutely is. Obeying all sorts of counsel is a personal decision. And I think the church is we always use language like that. I mean, there are times when it's going to be like, here is a commandment. This is church doctrine. This is a commandment. This is something we do and we know about. But a lot of things we're asked to do we're being asked by our leadership that we have faith in to be prophets, or even all the way down to local leaders that they have inspired callings. And when we're trying to parse words and just say, well, it says it's my personal choice, and my personal choice says no. And it's like, well, what about the paragraph right before that in the handbook that says the church has a long history of vaccination and we encourage everyone to get vaccinated as the best means to like end the pandemic. But we ignore that because the next paragraph says, well,
Personal
it's my
choice.
choice. It's my choice. And it's like, okay.
Well, and then, and that stuff gets all twisted around too, because, it's like, people like to say, when people have a gripe about like the BYU honor code, it's like, well, it's your choice. If you don't like it, you can leave BYU, and things like that. And sort of like, personal choice is kind of a scapegoat phrase, I think, or just a scapegoat thing, because people will use it to mean whatever they want. Like, here is a standard, you have to follow it as a member of this church. Got it. And it's like, well, wait, what about personal choice? Well, if you don't like it, leave. It's like, well, they're telling us to get vaccinated. If you don't want to get vaccinated, leave the church. It doesn't work. And it's also funny to me,
exactly.
And I don't think Sam necessarily went into this, but one of the things that this conversation was reminding me of, with the whole like, we don't necessarily need to be commanded in all things, and the church doesn't, has said these things, so it doesn't need to do more. But then you think about something like President Hinckley, offhand, like it was an offhand comment in a youth fireside talk, saying something about one set of earrings in women's ears. And it was just like this, like just one pair. And then he keeps on with the rest of the talk, doesn't say anything else about it for the rest of the talk. And the BYU honor code got changed. Hundreds of thousands of women in the church removed their second pair of earrings. Like it became like
Yeah.
this enforced standard at BYU and at youth dances and things like that. And it was like this really, and the church even released an official statement saying like, we take no official position on how many, earrings a woman should wear. But Elder Bednar gave a talk, within the last decade where he talked about how somebody broke up with his girlfriend because she didn't take out her second pair of earrings. And like,
That's
and
skank.
so it's so funny that it's sort of like, we're like, oh my gosh, this offhand remark means we have to change all of our standards and mode of behavior. And then you get some really strong and direct statements about vaccinations. And it's like, hey, this isn't a commandment, man. So I don't know. People will take what they want and treat it seriously based on their personal choice and preferences. But I don't
Now,
know.
to push back a little bit, the church, not on that, but the church's website, once again, in true to the faith,
Mhm.
does say girls or women that want to have their ears pierced are encouraged to wear only one pair of modest earrings. Those who choose to disregard this counsel show a lack of respect for themselves and God. They will someday regret their decision.
This only proves my point, Jeff. Like
Yikes.
again, that with an offhand remark from the president of the church, that he never elaborated on, at least in that talk, becomes this thing that makes it onto the church website, has its own entry, almost on the church's website. That becomes like an important thing that we talk about and enforce, and vaccinations does not. Brent Sam mentions briefly that BYU Hawaii is requiring vaccinations, but then that leads him to the question of why aren't BYU Provo and BYU Idaho requiring it? Why is we're starting to see more and more corporations, private entities in the United States start to require their employees, especially employees that come into the office, that they're required to either be vaccinated or show proof of a negative COVID test. Why isn't the church doing that with their employees? Why aren't we doing that with church leadership and saying like, hey, if you serve in a presidency or in local leadership, area leadership, whatever, you need that your first priority is the health and protection of your congregants. Therefore, you are required to be vaccinated. And if you choose not to be, then we could release you. I mean, maybe that's too harsh, but I just don't understand why. There are definitely things, if the church, if it is a priority for the church to support and get people vaccinated, and so that we can open temples again, so that we can resume normal operations, so that we can keep each other healthy and alive. It's just kind of interesting that they're not doing more within their power that would not be unprecedented to do to make that happen.
No, I mean, like I'm shocked with remember that good run we had there in the mid aughts when like 30% of conference talks were about pornography because clearly it was a problem within the ranks of the church. If we can marshal the resources to have everyone really just going after pornography, surely we can more overtly and transparently address the importance of getting vaccinated while stressing, of course, it's a personal choice because we don't want to make anyone feel bad. If you consult with your doctor and you have medical concerns about being vaccinated, that's a completely legitimate concern and
Of
something you should
course. And
talk
we
about. Of
always have
course.
to give that caveat, right? That, of course, there are like, I know somebody who the last time they had a vaccination ended up in the hospital because their body reacted, and it wasn't a, COVID, it was the pneumonia vaccine.
I've also reacted very poorly to pneumonia vaccines. Oh, here's some HIPAA
So,
stuff again, I guess. But
oh
yeah,
my
there you
gosh, Jeff, we're
go.
both
Sorry.
going to jail.
All right. You can't ask me these
But this
questions.
person, yeah, ended up in the hospital, and then and they said, I don't think I should be getting this vaccine, and they consulted with their doctor, and they said, yeah, if you had that, terrible of a reaction to this vaccine in the past, then it's probably the best for you not to get this vaccine. So I get that. Like there are obviously going to be exceptions, but most of us are not exceptions. No matter how much you think that you're an exception, you listener who's sitting here smugly defying us inside your mind, you are probably not. And if you think you are, talk to a doctor, and that doctor will probably say, I see no reason why you should not be vaccinated to protect yourself and the people around you.
Yeah,
So
I can't stress this enough, folks. Like, there is not some conspiracy, especially if your concern is that the vaccines were for emergency use authorization. Okay, well, Pfizer is going to be fully approved within a matter of weeks at this point. So if that's a concern, okay. I mean, I get it. I don't totally agree with it because I think they go through robust processes even for emergency use. I mean,
yes,
think about this. This is not, first of all, private industry putting their name on the line isn't going to just do it just all hastily without vetting their product before putting it out there in the wild, right? No one's going to do that for any product, least of all a vaccine that could seriously hurt people if they did it incorrectly. So think about that. On their own, they care about quality control. It's still vetted through the FDA. It's just given emergency use authorization. I should not be those concerns there that this is something that's going to ruin your life or impair you, or then least of all the whole conspiracy side that this is about government control or who knows what else. Because like we've all have had vaccines in the United States in some capacity throughout our lives. I mean, I had to get like Tdap boosters just to because my kids were being born. Whoop de doo! Like these are things we do, and it's fine. And I don't want to. I said whoop de doo, and I'm sorry for that. I don't want to diminish anyone's concerns, but truly, the vaccines are safe. There are always in every single vaccine going to be outliers and statistical anomalies and people who still get sick, people who are still getting COVID. We're seeing a lot of now, especially because of the Delta variant, even if you're vaccinated. But that happens with all vaccines. That's not something new. Vaccines are not. I think one of the better analogs I saw is a seatbelt, and someone was raving on TikTok about like, did you see this new government mandate? What is this thing? What is this thing? And they can't even guarantee that I won't die in an accident. What is the point of this? I shouldn't have this, and it's a perfect analog for it. A vaccine, the idea is to keep you out of the hospital, and it also usually keeps you from getting sick in the first place. That's the point.
yeah. I mean,
And
there's
it's
so
not
many
perfect,
reasons for the
and it's
vaccine, and none of them are to guarantee that you will not get this disease or get sick from it. But like, it helps prevent spreading it. It helps prevent severe instances of the disease. In some cases, it prevents you from getting it. That's great. Especially with this vaccine, it's the most effective vaccine we've seen in the history of vaccines. But there's always going to be, like you said, those outliers, and there's always going to be people who have breakthrough infections anyway.
and it's amazing how good the COVID vaccine is compared to like the one
No,
thing I
like I
think
said, in
is
the history of vaccines, there's never been a vaccine this effective.
yeah,
Like
and it's I think it's been good and educational for a lot of us because we don't think much about the effectiveness rates of flu shots or pneumonia vaccines or even polio vaccines or anything like that. But I mean, this is the way out of it, though, my friends. And if you are on the fence, please seriously consider your reasons for it. And I'm sure we all have family members or other friends who, especially within our faith community, who are not on board. But the only way out of this pandemic is either we all get COVID or we get vaccinated. And the only way the economy and everything else gets back to normal is if the pandemic stops.
also, if you
That's
like
it.
you said,
That's
if
the
you
only.
have concerns and you need to learn more about it, please use a good source. Like you wouldn't go to like John Dillon or however you say his name to learn about the church, right? Therefore, you also shouldn't go to an anti-vaxxer site or a conspiracy theory site or even a lot of these just kind of offshoot news sites to learn
Yeah.
about the effectiveness and the safety of the vaccine. Find somebody who is an expert who has authority to talk about this and in a way that is correct and knowledgeable to learn, not from whatever site is just going to reinforce your own bias.
There we
Anyway,
go.
we're kind of preaching here.
No, there we go. We're good. We're running long.
Can I
We got
just
one more.
yeah,
One
let me
more.
just talk, and we don't need to talk about this very long. In fact, I think it's best if we don't. But it was just really interesting to me. I came across this on Twitter, and I kind of had to do a little digging just to make sure, because like when we talk about DesNet, which we have before, and when we talk
Mhm.
about people who are doxxed, I don't like giving a lot of press to that. Like, first of all, I don't think it's our job to dox anybody. So, I don't think that's what TWIM does. So I don't want to mention names here. But
Yeah, that's fair.
and then the people who were talking about this on Twitter were being a little cagey about it because I think they were just trying not to give a lot of attention to this individual because, why would you give attention to somebody who's spouting white supremacy junk in the name of the church? But if you're not familiar with DesNet, if you haven't listened to us talk about it before, it is a movement, largely on Twitter, but online, of people who say that they are just for the profit and for strengthening the church, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of things that they say are part of their mission statement, but when you drill down into it, many of the prominent, frequent people who post under the DesNet hashtag, and DesNet is short for Deseret Nation, a lot of these people actually believe some very vile things. We talked about how somebody revealed screenshots of a Discord chat where
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these DesNet people were sharing their thoughts, and it was all very sexist and anti-Semitic and anti-Black and anti, just homophobic, et cetera, misogynistic. We could go on. So these are not good things, and these are not things that really belong in Zion or in the gospel of Jesus Christ. Anyway, there's been an account on Twitter that has dedicated itself to doxing these DesNat people because most of them post anonymously. And very famously, I'm sure you talked about this a few weeks ago, one of these people who got doxed was an assistant attorney general for the state of Alaska, and he ended up losing his job, which created some controversy too about, so that's why I don't want to join in on the doxing. But there was another prominent DesNat poster who got doxed recently. He's from the state of Virginia. He had worked for Booz Allen Hamilton, and he lost his job there. So what he has done, he has gone onto Patreon and has created a Patreon account. And the whole point of, if you donate to his Patreon, as Jeff noted at the beginning of the show, it's $37. And when I first clicked on this, I for some reason, when I first found this, it came up on the European Patreon, and it ended up being like 36 euros, which I thought was strange. It's an odd number for him to be asking for. Anyway, what he's doing, and I'll go ahead and tell you, and we're not going to give you links here because we don't want to drive people to his site, but his Patreon it's a community for men who want to think, who want to think and speak without fear of intimidation, to stop worrying about the approval of people who hate you, to get out of corporate America while the getting is good. And so really what this is code for is, he's like, if you have reprehensible views, racist, homophobic, sexist, etc., white supremacists, first of all, we're here to help you, prevent you from getting doxxed. And he talks about that later on. There's a list of things that he's going to help you with. One of them is operational security, meaning how to keep your identity private so you can continue to say terrible things online. And then also, though, he's like trying to teach people how to become more self-sufficient, so that if you do get fired after being doxxed, you can continue to have terrible views and express them, and then support yourself with your own business.
Well, that's the important thing. That's the important part of it.
Right. And what the reason why I thought this was worth bringing up is not, I mean, it is an interesting sort of side story. But the other interesting thing is that, like, this person is making such an effort to help people hold and express reprehensible views that are antithetical to being a good human, but also definitely to being a good Christian, let alone a Latter-day Saint.
Yeah.
And instead of like saying like, man, I really should reevaluate my racism and sexism and anti-Semitism. And again, and I don't have no idea how anti-Semitism works in a church where we, constantly loud being children of Israel. Please explain to me how that works. But anyway, instead of like saying like, maybe I should be a better person. Instead, they're like, here's how to continue being a horrible person and not have to suffer the ill effects of it. Like, they're trying to remove consequences from choices and actions, which is just, I don't know. It's crazy to me. So anyway, like I said, I'm not going to give names here. I'm not going to point you to his Patreon. If you dig, you can find this information if you're really interested. But yeah, like seriously, people, if people call you out for being bad, maybe it's time to reevaluate and figure out, oh, maybe this is bad. Maybe I need to be better, instead of how can I get away with this in a better way and charge people so I can teach them how to get away with it too.
You could report it to Patreon, by the way. Patreon might.
You can. In fact, and that was the original link that I found, is that it was a link to let Patreon know that this is, not a worthwhile cause, and that they can, get blocked by Patreon. Anyway,
well, I like what it always says on Patreon, like so-and-so, like ours says, so-and-so is producing podcasts. This will say so-and-so is producing racism.
Right.
That'll be good. Well, there's a good note to leave on, folks. We had a fun show, and then we talked about all the shortcomings of so many of our flock, but we still love them, and we love all of you. We love everyone, and hope we can all love each other a little bit better, and not be racists, and be our brother's keepers. Remember that, folks. Remember the whole covenant you make at baptism, mourn with those who mourn, comfort those who stand in need of comfort. Let's try to do more
bear
of that.
one another's burdens.
That whole thing. Just think about how that might apply in your life. And I'll do the same. So it's been a great week. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Jared, pleasure to have you here as always, my friend.
As always.
As always. No, we haven't done news in a while because we did Keith Erickson
That's
a
right.
while ago. Anyway, so it's good to have you back for some news, buddy. And everyone, thanks for taking the time to listen. We love doing the show, and we can't do it without you. So thank you very much for your continued support and patronage. And big shout out to those patrons. We talked about Patreon a lot this week, but thanks to all of you for taking the time to tune in. For Jared, I'm Jeff. This has been This Week in Mormons. And until we speak again, be well, be holy, and be happy. Bye-bye.